All right. Hello. I think you're on mute. I think you're on
Novel
mute.
Writing Month and Picture Book Month with a special series of author interviews along with our daily post promoting literacy and all things books, reading, and writing. So today we have with us William C. Tracy. William C. Tracy writes and publishes queer science fiction and fantasy through his indie press Space Wizard Science Fantasy, which is open to submissions. Wow. So put a note, pin in that in your notes or sticky note somewhere. SpaceWizardScienceFantasy.com for all
Right.
of my sci-fi writers and fantasy writers who would be interested in submission. So that's awesome.
Yeah.
His largest work is The Dissolution Verse, a space opera with music based magic, including 10 books and an RPG. He also has a standalone epic fantasy with seasonal fruit based magic through an LGBTQ plus small press. Wow. He is currently working on a hard sci-fi trilogy with a generational colony ship and a planet covered by a fungal entity. William is a North Carolina native and a lifelong fan of science fiction and fantasy. He has a master's in mechanical engineering and has both designed and operated heavy construction machinery. He is also trained in Wando
Wano
Ryu,
Ryu.
Ryu karate since 2003. Wow, that's 20 years, right?
Yeah.
And runs his own dojo in Raleigh, North Carolina. Wow. He's an avid video and board gamer, a beekeeper, a reader, and of course, a writer. So, welcome to the far side, William Tracy.
Thank you. Yeah. Happy to be here.
Awesome. And I have to give you some extra points because you're a North Carolina native like myself. So that's
Yeah.
awesome.
Great. Great. Yeah.
All right. So let's dive into it. We're going to talk a little bit about um your your work, and this particular work is the fruits of the gods. It's fruits of the gods.
Yes.
And what was the inspiration, just kind of right offhand, what was the inspiration behind this particular work?
Yeah. So this was, and the intro. This was the one that was originally published with a small press,
Okay.
and I'm actually republishing it. So this is a newly edited version. It has more content in it, so it has a little bit more story. And it has a very nice new cover. She's very pretty. I love these designers. They do a really good job. Um, but this was inspired by my love of fantasy and also my love of gardening and fruit trees. My parents had a huge garden growing up, and I have a big garden now myself, and a bunch of fruit trees in our yard. So I wanted to put that together and make it magical, and live in the South and sort of a little bit of that culture. And also, I like ancient mythology, so it takes a little bit of the Babylonian mythology and gods, all mixed together. So magic, fruit, Babylonian, Southern culture, sort of all together.
Okay. All right. So now, typically, readers may see a message provided in the content, like the content note indicating that the work is a work of fiction, an event, places, and persons and products are of the author's imagination. However, I mean, you actually provided something different that I've ever seen in any of in the books I've read, a content warning. And it says this book contains depictions of abuse, rape, mutilation, torture, and incest. So, why was that kind of important for you to have in this particular book, or kind of be like a caveat for this particular book? And is it something that you've provided in any of your other works, or this is kind of a new kind of twist?
Yeah, so I would say this is probably one of my darker works, and I don't write very dark things. They're mostly very hopeful and wondrous. I like to write new worlds, and this one has a lot of that too. But this does have a couple trigger warnings for people, and especially those things are particularly more harmful to some people. So I wanted to make sure that was up at the beginning, because like you said, I run a small press. I try to raise queer and LGBT voices, and a lot of people have history with that. So I want to make sure people are comfortable with what they read. So I try to put content warnings on anything that I have, so you can choose what you want to read. And also, if you can, you can decide, do I want to read this? Do I want to get into the story? And sort of know ahead of time that those things may be in there. We actually have some romance anthologies. It's a lesbian romance anthologies that we have, and all of those, each story in there has content warnings at the beginning for anything that may be in the story, as well as what sort of romantic pairing is in there. So again, you can pick and choose, make sure you're going with full knowledge into what you're reading to make sure you're not surprised by anything. So yeah, that's where that came from.
And then you have like a quirky, kind of interesting, kind of pull you in type of dedication. Says, to all the fruit trees and bushes I've grown over the years for keeping me happy and healthy with their produce. This is also dedicated to the deer who ate my entire garden one year. You'll find him in chapter 4. So most dedications can be, pretty cut and dry, but this gave the reader some buy-in to find out about this deer. If they jump ahead to chapter 4. I didn't do that. I didn't want to cheat myself, but I worked my way to that up to that point. So how did you arrive to kind of writing your dedication that way?
Yeah, well, like I said, the inspiration for this was gardening and fruit trees and stuff like that. So that's where the first part came from. I really love gardening. I've made jelly and jams cooked with our produce. So I love my garden, which gets hard when you have wildlife who wants to share in your garden. And we live on a fairly wooded street. We have a big forest in the back of our house. So occasionally we have deer who like to come in, and I have some deer repellent and stuff that I spray on my garden, make sure it keeps them away. But they are really good. The second I forget to put deer repellent out, they're there. And this one in particular just had beautiful garden. Everything was ready. Grew some cantaloupes that year. I had ones about this big that were just about ripe. And I was like, okay, tomorrow morning I need to go and put some spray out there, make sure the deer come in. Gone. They're just like shells of melons. Tomatoes were gone. Everything. So rather than going out and hunting the deer myself, I put him in the book and had one of the characters hunt him.
Awesome. And the book begins kind of with this relationship between the mortals and and the gods. Definitely puts you in that mindset of thinking about the Greek and Roman mythology, with kind of this relationship that blossoms or grows out of just something to have, and then turning to work, kind of a desiring worship and that kind of thing. But we have this relationship between, kind of as a starting point. So how will kind of that distinction play out through the course of the story.
Yeah. Like I said, I love mythology and looking at gods and why people, especially with like pantheons of gods, why people worship those gods and what they mean, and how those are interpretations of natural events and seasons and things like that. Especially if you look at Greek or Norse or Babylonian gods.
Mm.
So this was taking some inspiration from Babylonian gods to some extent, but also my own creations. So this has four gods of the seasons, one god for each season, and um, and actually each chapter in the book has a little bit of the story. So as you read through the book, you also read the creation story of this land and how the gods created the people and created the magic, which is imbued in their sort of their chosen fruit trees. So each god has one chosen fruit tree of the season, and that tree bears fruit that people can eat and then do magic.
Along kind of with that relationship with gods and mortals, okay, you see the story kind of, you get the sense of at the beginning, you got two servant slaves in the process of bearing the child of their mistress.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then, in my question initial, like, okay, if this was some kind of noble birth, or, why would you be burying your child at night,
Yeah.
in the darkness of night, instead of like a more traditional kind of pomp and circumstance type thing? If this, you know, this was a child of kind of noble birth, and they had, they were the, they had, that family had, the father was one of authority and that kind
Hmm.
of thing. Why a late night burial?
Yeah, I think this really plays into the noble's character. That's Eric Haba'ata, who's one of the main villains in the book. I think it shows off a little bit what his temperament is,
Mhm.
because it's a in this case it's a miscarriage, so that the baby wasn't born. But that shows a little bit of his arrogance, that he considers it a failure that his wife wasn't able to bring a child to term, and he's also, you learn later on, he's had other failed children. His wife hasn't been able to bear children, so he's a little embarrassed about this. He doesn't want to show this off, and so he's sort of hiding it and just having his servants bury this child, so nobody else can find out about it.
And so that kind of brings into this idea of like class system that kind of filters
Hmm.
um, where the distinctions were important for you to explore from, characters like um, Balili,
Yeah,
Balili,
Ilili.
and and, and Kisa,
Yeah.
and like the ones with the like blonde hair and the brown streak, the blonde hair and like a reddish streak, or um, what are some of the reasons to distinguish, place?
Yeah, this is sort of the other half of the magic system in the book. One half is that
Mhm.
the trees produce fruit, and it's seasonal fruit, so each season has a different type of magic. The other half of this is the people who are considered nobles by themselves, have magical hair colors. So each different type of magical hair color, like you were saying, black, it's black, brown, red, silver, and when you have one piece of fruit and one hair color, it provides one type of magic power. Um, so these nobles have set themselves up in charge of everybody who doesn't have that power, and they in fact bleach the hair of their servants. So even if they did have some sort of magical ability, they don't know it, and their hair is kept blonde, which is the non magical color. So there's some people who don't have any magic and just have blonde hair. So the nobles are sort of, as you said, creating this caste system and forcing people to be of this lower caste simply by bleaching their hair and restricting them from being able to eat the magic, so they don't know what they have. So it's an artificial system, and
Mm-hmm.
that was something that I really liked exploring in this book. That it is, and again, I'm from the South in the U.S., and we
Mm-hmm.
have a long history of being real bad to people. So I wanted to explore how this is an artificial system and it doesn't work in any way, and you're basically artificially separating people. So that was something that I wanted to play out over the course of this book, is showing that everybody has their own power. There's not people who are better than other people, and these nobles are basically in the wrong and have tried to create an artificial system that could never last.
And so it also kind of gives way to that idea of having access,
Mm-hmm.
where if you're of a lower caste, that your access to the fruit, you're not, it's like you're not supposed to have it, or you're
Right.
not supposed to, be able to, you can help us harvest it, and you can care, you may have a gift for, caretaking, you
Mm-hmm.
know, of the orchards and all those kinds of things, but not having access to something that may, provide you some level of freedom, or may provide you, have you level up, so to speak.
Right.
So the and I guess one of the fruits was that malice fruit,
Mm-hmm.
and um, does its production or lack of harvest is essential to the division among the classes. Since
Um,
you have this kind of hierarchy.
yeah, there's this is the book starts in late winter, early spring, which is when the malice, which is the Latin word for apple. It's basically an apple.
Mm.
So this is again my love of playing with words and things. So each of the fruits are basically an apple, an orange, mulberries, and cherries, and it's just a Latin name for each of those is the one that has magic. Um, so it's a small farm up in the mountains. So just like in Appalachia around here in North Carolina, that's the crop up in mountains. You grow apples. Um, so this is what their farm grows, and in this case, it's a magical crop of apples, and that particular fruit will give elemental powers to people. So, fire, ice, earth, and air, depending on which hair color it is. So it's a very physical power as well, which also works for this sort of restricted environment where Arakapata is in charge and can use he's got red hair and he can control fire with magic. So he's very physical about keeping his servants from going anywhere. So that's what the main characters are getting out from under. They're trying to gain their freedom from this, um, and that's their starting place. So then they gradually go out in the world and find out the different kinds of magic and how they can grow and expand.
And of course, those servants, like right at the beginning of the story, who are um, like siblings,
Hmm.
and are like it at the beginning of the story, they're in that process, of course, bearing, bearing the, the miscarriage, so to speak, um, and they tack on to something, and or hit something in the process, and it's, you see through, moving through from that particular point into some of the further chapters, where you can see the obvious kind of sibling signals,
Hmm.
like, okay, like the eye gaze type of things, as to,
Yeah.
okay, you better not say anything, don't say anything, or you need
Yeah.
to cover this, or you need to move closer here, kind
Right.
of, body signals and movements, as to kind of protect each other.
Hmm.
And also, in the midst of them trying to figure out, okay, how we're going to, find our way of escape, or getting free without notice. And you always have a sibling that's like, one's more bold,
Hmm.
um, than the other. So how does that, relationship, kind of, that sibling relationship, um, kind of evolve,
Hmm.
from the beginning, throughout throughout the story? And will we see, a break, in the sibling relationship, because of choices and decisions made?
Yeah, that's sort of the central part of this book, really, is it's these two sisters, and you see them as, very confined people to begin with. And only when they become free, they, a little bit of spoilers, they learn they have magic, so they get to learn the magic. Um, they start to expand and grow, and this is where I had a lot of fun writing these characters. I tend to be pretty organic when I write and how the character develops. Um, and the younger sister is actually the more protective and stern of the two. Um, she sees her older sister as being a little bit more frivolous and sort of going with the flow and doing whatever happens to come up. So she's wanting to stay back and guard and protect. But she's also the younger of the two, so she doesn't have quite as much experience. And you find out through the book that the older sister has actually been through some worse times than the younger one, and this is partially why she's just going out there. She's doing her thing and wants to make the best of the world and change it. So they separate for a little bit in the book, and it's really not for that long, but they during that time they actually grow and change quite a bit. Um, and the younger one starts to realize that she can see how things work and starts to act on that side of making changes and even working with machines and um, making the world a better place, while the older one is turning from just being bold and sort of flighty to having a purpose and really acting, and she's the one who's driving change forward. So they come back together, and I really like how that relationship develops, that it's still sort of the same dynamic that they started with, but now they're much more powerful and they're much more able to change, and they know who they are. So yeah.
What is something that you hope that, one or two lessons that you hope that a reader would take away or pull out, from the
Hmm.
story? Because, I mean, this is a different kind of, at least for me, it was a different kind of, read, just, I've got a younger sister. I'm a big sister. And
Hmm.
so I, had me thinking of my own, my own dynamic with my younger sibling,
Right.
and how that relationship has evolved over time.
Hmm.
And just, kind of the setting and things, and the challenges and decisions, and changes in relationships, as and how you interact with what's going on with the world around you, and each
Yeah.
person's different responses to that.
Hmm.
How do what's the takeaway, what's the lesson that you want readers to come away with, or the feeling that you want readers to come away with?
Yeah. And this is where this book is similar to a lot of the other ones I write. I want to end with a feeling of growth and power, with feeling excited about seeing what's out there. Um, and I think the journey that they go on in the book sort of exemplifies that. They become bigger, they become better, and they learn what's going on in the world. This is something that happened to me as I started working in the construction industry and became an engineer and started finding out how stuff works behind the scenes. Something that's always struck me is, you go to a doctor or an engineer or a scientist and you're like, wow, this person, this is their thing, this is what they do, they must know this. But it's always important to remember that everybody's a person. There's, they've always got something that's happening that you don't know about. So no matter how powerful a person seems, or how you're approaching somebody else, we're all just people. So never sell yourself short. Um, you've always got some experience that can be new to somebody else, even somebody who potentially has much more experience or much more knowledge than you do. So, I think everybody has a chance to really make themselves. Anybody can learn anything, I always think. So that's one thing that I like in this book, that you see people come from, the very lowest to the very highest in the book.
And do you feel like you found your niche in this, kind of this genre, fantasy genre, or is there anything else that you'd be interested um, in exploring in your writing?
Yeah, I've jumped around a little bit. This one's actually the only, I want to say, this is the only straight epic fantasy sort of book, sword and sorcery
Mhm.
sort of book that I've written. Um, Most of my others tend to mix science and fantasy a little bit.
Mhm.
My Dissolution verse is science fantasy. It's got magic, but it's also got aliens in it, so it's a little bit of each. And then the one I'm working on now, I went completely the opposite direction, and that's hard sci-fi. So that's all physics and spaceships and planets and stuff. So yeah, it's and actually the next series I'm going to write, I'm going to go back to the sort of thing with Fruits of the Gods. It's going to be fantasy and sort of epic fantasy, a new world and magic and things like that. So yeah, I like to jump around a little bit.
And then, of course, I mean, you've got several series um, of works
Yeah.
out here. So, do you like writing in terms of a series, or or do you know, figure that at some point you'll just have that one book, and you know it'll be an epic, iconic, classic book that you'll promote or whatever, versus doing
Yeah.
like the work with series?
Yeah, I don't know. This is actually my only full standalone book.
Uh-huh.
So this one stands by itself. This one you can just read by itself. I also have the science fantasy trilogy, and I have a science fiction trilogy that I've written. And I do like that format because you can tell a little bit larger story, and it's sort of the beginning,
Mhm.
middle, and end, book one, two, and three. So I like that, but a lot of people like to read just a nice one standalone book as well. So again, I like to jump around. I did Fruits of the Gods, which is a standalone. I have two trilogies, and then the next one I'm going to be writing is going to be a little bit longer. I'm looking more for maybe a 5 to 8 book format with that one. So that's going to be more of a large series. So I'm going to try that out and see how that goes, and then from there we'll see what's next.
All right. So, are there any particular authors that you've kind of patterned yourself after, or you've written kind of from a more authentic place? But I mean, who are your influences, and
Yeah.
who are you reading?
Yes. All over the place. Well, I say all over the place, but mostly in science fiction and fantasy. Um, but I started with Tolkien back when I was a kid. Read through that. Read through David Eddings and J. And uh, Robert Jordan when I was younger. The Wheel of Time series, and then I really love Brandon Sanderson's works. Those are more of what I tend to write, is sort of the
Mhm.
the eye-opening new worlds sort of thing. But I also like a lot of sci-fi. I really like the Expanse series, which is very hard sci-fi space exploration sort of thing. Um, let's see. And right now, I've actually got into more on the epic fantasy side. Cradle is a 12-book series that's about lots of magic powers and fighting and exploring worlds. Um, so uh, yeah, that's what I'm reading now, and then I'm partway through another series called Dungeon Crawler Carl. That's about a guy, basically the world explodes and he's sent into a dungeon that's sort of like a game, so he's playing through a game. Um, so yeah, all over the place. I like a lot of indie authors. I was actually a judge for a indie sci-fi contest, which I'm entered into this year, and got to read something like 20 or 30 indie science fiction books that year, which is great. I saw a lot of really cool stories. So yeah, if you're looking for stuff to read, look for indie authors. Small press, they often have really cool ideas that are not ones you see in mainstream stories.
All right. Well, thank you so much for spending this time with us. Can
Yeah.
you tell our viewers and listeners, those who are watching live and those who may catch us by replay, how they can connect and follow you on social media or how they can
Mhm.
purchase your work?
Yeah, definitely. The easiest place is go to spacewizardsciencefantasy.com. That is my small press, Space Wizard Science Fantasy. So I have all my books listed there. And also all my links. You can find me on social media. I'm on Twitter as it sinks into the ocean, also on Threads and Blue Sky, and on Facebook as well. Um, and Facebook, I'm on William C. Tracy SWSF, Space Wizard Science Fantasy. So if you look up William C. Tracy SWSF or Space Wizard Science Fantasy, any of those, you can find me online.
Great, 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 great. So we're so happy that you were able to spend this afternoon with us. We want to thank our guests, William C. Tracy, for spending the time with us this afternoon. And we wish you continued success with Fruits of the Gods and
Yeah,
all
thank you.
the other projects to come. And this is, a fairly, new re-release
Mhm.
of the project. So definitely it's close to Black Friday. You're picking up stocking stuffers, and it's Family Literacy Month. So pick up
Yes.
a copy of Fruits of the Gods to um, as a stocking stuffer,
Yeah.
as a perfect gift for your avid fantasy reader. I know I'm close to the end, and we gave he gave some good background without giving the
Yeah.
story away, which is
Yeah.
totally great and awesome. So
Yeah.
thank you, William, for being with us on today. And for our audience, we say make sure you're staying tuned to the Farside Co-Ed Book Club Facebook page for more author interviews and posts as we celebrate Family Literacy Month. This is novel writing month. So, for all you authors and writers, go back to the beginning and you'll hear how you can submit to Williams Press
Yeah.
if you're interested. Have something in the realm of kind of sci fi and fantasy. So, um,
Yeah.
check that out, catch the replay, rewind
Yeah.
it back. All right, this is novel writing month, and the month is not over, so you still have time to do that great and amazing writing. And this is also picture book month, and so for those who are interested in picture books for their kiddos, go out there and you'll find some great reads at some of your independent booksellers. Definitely check them out. I know I have my favorite go-tos when I go home to North Carolina, and then of course up here in the DMV, some great indie stores. So Until next time, many roots and many voices are part of the infinite story. So plant your seed. Have a great and wonderful evening.
All right.